Our top 10 things Guild Wars 2 needs to improve video has been generating a lot of creative feedback for ideas that could help Guild Wars 2 become a more enjoyable experience. Keep up the comments, thoughts and suggestions, guys. Some of these are really thought-provoking, going over the potential pros and cons of the fixes and the good and bad scenarios they might create. However, I was quite shocked to find there are a few people who believe that Magic Find, which we briefly went over in point number 8, was just fine the way it is and shouldn't be altered. I'll state my views again on Magic Find just so we're clear from the start. It's not the concept of Magic Find that I have a problem with, but rather the way it's implemented into the game and the effects it has, which I'm certain are unintentional on the philosophy behind Guild Wars 2. In order to have Magic Find, you need to sacrifice other stats to obtain it. This works fine when soloing, as you are statistically weaker and have to work to overcome that disadvantage, with the reward for doing so a better chance at rare loot. However, when doing activities with a group, it's not just you that has to overcome that disadvantage, but the entire group, and the only person benefiting from this disadvantage is the player that brought it to the group in the first place. In short, a player is handicapping the rest of the group for his own personal gain. This flies right in the face of ArenaNet's goal to have players working together rather than against one another. Let's go over some of the arguments brought forward by people defending the current state of Magic Find. A common argument brought forth in the defense of Magic Find is, it's player performance that matters, not stats. That's something I wholeheartedly agree on. I dislike players that exclude others because they are not of a certain class or running a certain spec, or simply because their spec is not part of the metagame. However, it's hardly a defense for using Magic Find in a group. If your group had the option of bringing you in normal gear or in your Magic Find gear, which do you think they would choose? You're still doing a disservice to your group by handicapping yourself to improve your profit. Yes, I agree skill is important, but by using that to justify your use of Magic Find, you're basically saying, I'm better than you guys, therefore I deserve more money. Another argument getting thrown my way a lot is, if you discriminate against a player using Magic Find as selfish, you should discriminate against someone who uses Berserkers for the same reason. I don't agree with this because someone running full Berserker's gear is still bringing more to the group than someone running Magic Find, statistically speaking, of course. Yes, they have little defense, but they're bringing good offense. The same goes for every other stat type. They are bringing something that can, and should, be benefiting the group. A player running Magic Find is bringing subpar stats that benefit the group. You could also argue that using Zerkers will result in a player being dead, therefore is no use to the group because they have no defense. The exact same can be said for running Magic Find, as it doesn't offer any defense either. At least the Berserker players are bringing some damage in place of their low defenses. You know, this seems as good a time as any to go over just how much a player running Magic Find is at a disadvantage compared to someone who is not. Endgame equipment, well with the exception of Celestial Gear, but we'll get into that later, has 3 stats on it, 1 major and 2 minor. You can get a list detailing this on the Guild Wars 2 wiki by typing in item nomenclature. As you can see here, items with the Magic Find stat give up the major stat boost for the Magic Find. Using this list, we can work out exactly how many stat points are sacrificed in order to obtain a full Magic Find set. The total stat points of a full set of normal exotic gear is 2,399, whereas the total stat points of a full set of Magic Find gear is 1,396. That's a drop of 1,003 stat points. This makes using Magic Find gear about 58% as effective as using normal gear. You can do the same thing with any piece of single armor and get the same results, give or take a few percent. So, if you say players running dungeons in Magic Find gear are doing their job half-assed, you're statistically pretty close to the truth. Lastly, I've had players posting I'm an elitist jerk who only wants to play with people running metagame builds because I don't want to run with Magic Find builds. I've been quick to respond by saying I'm happy to run with non-meta builds as a player's preferred playstyle is up to them. Haha, they say, but I'm built for Magic Find and that's my playstyle. Well, all I have to say to that is bullshit. Greed is not a playstyle, and if it is, it's not one we should be encouraging. If someone ninja'd your loot and then said, it's okay, that's my playstyle, would you feel less cheated? They may as well have just said, that's how I roll. Which, come to think of it, some back in Warcraft did. And all that did was make me want to go Jay and Silent Bob on their asses. So that's my views on why Magic Find is not in line with Guild Wars 2's goals. On a more positive note now, there has been a lot of discussion on how Magic Find could be better implemented. I mentioned an inspect function during the top 10 video, but as many players on the forums have been quick to point out, this promotes gear discrimination, not just against Magic Find, but against anything that is considered non-meta, and I agree with that. Some suggestions around this would be only allow Magic Find to be inspected, or displayed as a buff. Another popular suggestion that's been on the forums is that Magic Find could be altered to be a group-wide buff. This completely nullifies any problems I have with Magic Find, so I could see this working. Also, I can't see it as being too difficult to implement, and it wouldn't interfere on the current Magic Find gear. Also, who remembers the experience boost scrolls from Guild Wars 1? Magic Find versions of those would be quite welcome in groups, I'd wager. Yet another popular idea that's popped up across the forums would be allow Magic Find to be a stat that could be permanently attached to any piece of gear without sacrificing any stats. This again would nullify any problems I had with it, however it'd be a difficult system to implement, and there's always the question of what happens to the current Magic Find gear in the game. Taking all pros and cons into consideration, I believe the idea of making Magic Find a party-wide stat to be the best option. It doesn't require much time to implement, and it'll make Magic Find a more popular stat within groups. I can see parties actually advertising for this gear in content that they are easily breezing through in order to increase their rewards. As always guys, I'm curious to hear your thoughts and feedback on this particular issue. If you have any extra ideas you think regarding Magic Find that would be worth bringing to the table, please point them out in the comments section below, as well as how you feel on the current situation with Magic Find and the previously proposed ideas on how to fix it. Alright guys, this has been Kaaboose from Dodge This Spam. Looking forward to seeing you in game with the new patch coming in and all that, and I'll see you next time.
What do you think?
Let me think. Oh, I just died. That happened. That just happened. Yeah.
That's
Well, I don't know your.
Oh my.
Jesus, Cat. You actually need to be here.
Ooh.